Welcome back to Tipsy Whiskey Shenanigans. I'm Steven, and tonight, whenever the heck you're watching this, we are getting into 8 whiskeys you need to try now. So recently, I feel like I've been talking a little bit too much about like go-to bottles with insane value. So I kind of wanted to step away from that and bring up some bottles we don't talk about a lot or you don't see a lot in the whiskey communities, but are still bottles that I think you for sure should try. So today, I'm bringing you a list of 8 whiskeys that I think you need to try in 2023. But before we get into that, a word from our sponsors. This video is brought to you by ZBiotics. If you have ever skipped the gym after a night of drinking, just like I do about every single week right after my live streams, well then you need ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it the most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before you drink alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Try ZBiotics for yourself today. Go to zbiotics.com/tipsy, use a QR code down there, and use the code TIPSY at checkout to get 15% off on your first order. Also, ZBiotics is 100% money back guaranteed. So if for whatever reason you are unsatisfied, they will refund you, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/tipsy and use the code TIPSY at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Thank you again, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this video, but let's get back to it. All right, so we're talking whiskeys you need to try in 2023. And to kick that off, a bottle I don't talk about often and doesn't show up in hardly anything. Like literally, this is an underwhelming, unknown type bottle that not a lot of people know about, but comes from a huge freaking brand. And that is Jim Beam Single Barrel. This comes from Jim freaking Beam. This is a Jim Beam single barrel bottle, but almost nobody knows that this bottle exists, which is wild. This is 108 proof Jim Beam single barrels, and they're usually around like $35, $40-ish. So this is kind of a hybrid of if you wanted to blend like Old Granddad 114 with like a Knob Creek single barrel. It doesn't have the age and the complexity of those Knob Creek 9-year-olds. It's just not going to have that. That being said, these are still really freaking good. Honestly, it's just a perfect go-to kind of Jim Beam-esque style bourbon at 108 proof for a pretty decent price point. It's a huge step up from the Old Granddad 14 and a small step down from the Knob Creek single barrels, but I still think it's a really, really good bottle. And if you haven't tried it yet, I feel like you for sure need to try this bottle. It is worth it all the way. And after that one, a decently well-known bottle, but again, I feel like it's not talked about as much as it should be, and that is John J. Bowman single barrel. Everybody hunts Blanton's. Blanton's. This is like Blanton's lesser known cousin that claps cheeks comparatively. This stuff isn't technically from Buffalo Trace, but it is redistilled Buffalo Trace juice, single barrels, bottled at 100 proof. So it's like that Blanton's, not quite there because it's same, but different, but still same, at 100 proof, and it's still a single barrel. Doesn't come with that dope bottle, but the juice inside is so much better than any Blanton's I've had, and I've had quite a few Blanton's if we're gonna be honest. And next, another decently known bourbon, but still one I feel like nobody talks about, but I have brought it up quite a bit, not recently, but in the past, so I'm not gonna go too hard on that. but it is Wilderness Trail Bourbon, specifically the Ride Mash Bills. I think this is such an underrated Kentucky whiskey, similarly to Buffalo Trace in my opinion, but just darker. Like if you added some darkness and some heft to that Buffalo Trace sweet profile, that's like this. Maybe a little bit more youthful, you know, it happens, but still really, really freaking good and extremely underrated. And the next bourbon on the list, if you're a fan of finished bourbons and you haven't had any of their stuff, you are doing yourself a disservice, and that is Starlight. Starlight, Starbright, oh my God, this stuff is so much more than just all right. I freaking love Starlight whiskey. I unfortunately don't have too many of them because I have to buy online, and I don't like buying things online because I don't like paying for shipping because I'm cheap. But Starlight has some really, really solid finished whiskey. And if you haven't had any of it, it is really, really good. I would put a lot of these Starlight finished on par with a lot of those finished MGPs. They have this very distinctive kind of more, we'll call it crafty type vibe than MGP does, but I think this is a really, really solid family owned and operated distillery that should get more press than it does, because this stuff is awesome. I have some port finished stuff, I have some sherry finished stuff, and this stuff is a cognac finished, and they're all around like 4.5, 5-year-old craft whiskey that's finished, because they do a phenomenal job on finished whiskey. I've only had their finished whiskey, so I can't really speak on any other side of them, but I can't imagine that their non-finished stuff isn't amazing either. Now, switching away from bourbons, going into something a little bit spicier, we're getting into some rye whiskeys. And there's one particular rye whiskey that I freaking love that I have heard nothing about in like the past like year and a half, despite having drank like 2 bottles of it myself, and that is Stellum Rye. Why don't people talk about this anymore? This is a really, really good freaking rye. It is like $60 and it's just a really solid blended rye. I know these blend from a bunch of different states, you know, Indiana, MGP. I know they have some Dickel in here as well, or at least I suspect there's some Dickel, as well as some Kentucky rye. So there's a bunch of different ryes in this, but this is really solid. This is just as good as every other blended rye on the market. It's a little different. It might be a placebo effect, but this is a very, very like citrus forward, some could say orangey style rye, and I really like it. This is a nice kind of, we'll call it a cash drink springtime rye, if that makes sense, because usually I like to dial back my proof, but this has that really nice, bright, shiny, citrusy type rye, but also with a little bit of spice to back it up. So this is a really, really phenomenal rye. If you have not tried it, do yourself a favor, go out and try that. If you are a rye fan, obviously, you gotta like rye to like this, but this is a super underrated rye that you must try because no one talks about it. They sit on the shelf and they're phenomenal. And another rye that unfortunately doesn't sit on the shelves as much as the previous one because it's crushable. Everyone knows it's crushable. It's fantastic. The rye that got me into ryes, the rye I haven't had in probably over like 6 months until just recently, and I feel like I got to talk about it now. Old Forester 100 proof rye. The rye that started it all. The rye that got me into rye. Freaking love this Brown-Forman rye. This stuff is ridiculously good. This 100 proof rye is a staple of the rye industry, in my opinion. It's an atypical rye, way different than a lot of other ryes you're going to find out there. But this one, it's ridiculously good. This is like a malty, spicy bananas. It has that Brown-Forman banana, has a little bit of that like malty kind of like chocolatey characteristic, and some nice like rye heavy spiciness, pepperiness that just is fantastic. If you're looking to get into rye, again, it's an atypical rye, so it's not the best rye to kind of base what is a rye off of. That being said, it is a very accessible flavor profile, especially if you like the Old Forester 100 proof bourbon. That is a really nice step into the rye category because it takes that flavor profile, adds a chocolatiness to it, removes a lot of sweetness, and adds some spice to it. But it's still very much so like that Brown-Forman banana lives on in there. And then to transition into a craft whiskey, still a rye whiskey, but a craft whiskey that is ridiculously good, and I cannot wait till I can get my hands on some higher proof stuff because this stuff really blew my mind. Driftless Glen Rye. This is a really good rye. I don't know too much about Driftless Glen because they're nowhere near in my area and they're hard as heck to find, but I got this stuff online and it kind of blew my mind. I was not gonna lie, a little disappointed in the bourbon. The bourbon was disappointing, but the rye showed up in spades. But this is just such an underrated bottle. And yes, I know it is craft, so that kind of does play into it because it's honestly more based off of distribution. The last bottle on this list, you knew I had to do it. We're doing a single malt, but not the traditional single malt that I talk about. Not, it's not going to be Westland, Westward. It's not going to be Del Bach. We're getting into Balcones, Texas single malt whiskey. Their malts are mind-blowingly amazing. They are this just really nice, like malty Texas funk, this spiciness, this darkness, this molassesiness, and there is this like really nice like stone fruity flavor profile that you get on them. And I'm not only talking about like their cask strength single malts, I'm talking about like their normal like 53 proof one. I'm talking about the lineage. The lineage is super fruity, fan-freaking-tastic. These are my favorite though. These are my go-to. I have not actually had this because I legitimately just got this bottle like 30 minutes before I, started filming this. But this is a 59.9 proof, 62-month-old charred new oak barrel Balcones single malt. I can't wait to crack into this SOB because it's going to be freaking fantastic. But these are amazing, amazing, amazing. If you like Texas and you like malt, you can't go wrong with Balcones. And honestly, everyone who likes either Texas or malt that I've had try any of these bottles in the past, because even though I just got that, I have plenty of them back there and I've killed plenty of bottles. They all said that they really, really enjoyed them. And that's why it's on this list, because they're just great, great. But that was my list of 8 whiskeys that you must try in 2023. Please do me that favor, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below what you thought about my list. Let me know what are some bottles that you would have added to this list. I know there's probably so many in my collection that I haven't even personally tried that I need to try in 2023. So let me know which ones you would add to this list. Also, check out the Facebook, Instagram, and the Patreon. Links for all that stuff are down there below. That is a wrap for today's video. Cheers, y'all. We'll see you later.